Picture a place so flat and so vast that you can watch a thunderstorm coming for 3 hours before it hits you. Watch it build. Watch it turn green at the edges. Watch it make the horizon disappear behind a wall of darkness that moves toward you the way a slow, inevitable decision moves, quietly, and then all at once. Now put yourself underneath it, on a horse, surrounded by 2,000 animals that weigh 1,000 pounds each and are already nervous. Animals that can hear frequencies you can't. That can smell what's coming before your brain has even finished a sentence that looks bad. Now take away your shelter, take away your walls, take away the road home. That's the Great Plains in the 1870s. That's the Chisholm Trail. That's the place where the legend of the American cowboy was built. Except the legend got the details wrong in almost every direction. The legend gave you the gunfighter, the lone hero, the duel at high noon, the sheriff with the silver badge. The reality gave you dust. 3 months of it, solid, 6 inches of it in your lungs, caked in the corners of your eyes, in the creases of your knuckles, in your food, in your water, in the back of your throat at night when you're trying to sleep. The reality gave you a salary of about $30 a month if your trail boss was generous, and maybe $25 if he wasn't. The reality gave you boots that never dried out, and a bedroll that smelled like horse, and a cook who thought salt pork and beans constituted fine dining 6 nights out of 7. The reality gave you a job where the most dangerous thing you'd face was never an outlaw, never a gun, never a man. It was something much older and much less interested in you personally. We're going back tonight, not to the movies, not to the dime novels, not to the version with the clean hat and the dramatic music. We're going to the trail, one drive, one season. 1,700 miles from South Texas to Abilene, Kansas, where the cattle buyers and the railroad waited and the money was. We're going to smell it and hear it and feel it in the muscles of your thighs, where you've been in the saddle so long that the saddle has started to feel like a natural extension of your spine. I make these history stories, and I genuinely cannot tell if you're listening to fall asleep or because you want to understand what it felt like to be a person in a particular time and place. Maybe it's both. Maybe the best sleep is the kind where someone tells you a true story and you drift into it, and for a little while the difference between dreaming and learning becomes impossible to locate either way. Get comfortable. Here we go. You're 19 years old and you're lying on the ground in Besa County, Texas, in the spring of 1873. The ground is hard. This is not metaphorical. The cliche soil of South Texas has been baked by 6 months of heat into something close to ceramic, and your bedroll is doing approximately nothing to cushion it. Your hip bone has found a rock that wasn't there when you laid down. Or maybe it was there and you were just too tired to move, and now it's 3 in the morning and the choice is between moving and not moving, and somehow neither option sounds good. Overhead, the sky's doing something extraordinary. The sky out here is not the sky you grew up with. You grew up in Kentucky, in the wooded hill country, where the sky came in patches between the trees and the ridge lines, where you saw the stars through a latticework of branches in pieces. This sky is the whole thing, every bit of it, horizon to horizon, south to north, east to west, a complete uninterrupted dome of stars so dense that the spaces between them are harder to find than the stars themselves. The Milky Way runs across it like a river someone spilled. You've been sleeping under this sky for 2 weeks now, since you rode south from San Antonio to join up with the drive, and you still haven't gotten used to it. Your name is John Cade. You're 19 and you're going to drive cattle from South Texas to Kansas, and you have never done it before. Tomorrow morning the drive begins. You've been told this approximately 40 times in the last 2 days by the trail boss, a man named Elias Drum, who is 53 years old and has the face of someone who has spent 30 of those years looking directly into wind. He told the 14 of you gathered at the holding pens in a flat, matter-of-fact voice, the way a man tells you something he considers to be self-evident and is slightly annoyed that it requires saying at all. We move at first light. The herd is 2,240 head. We're moving them to Abilene, 1,700 miles, approximately 90 days, possibly more depending. He looked at the group. His eyes moved from face to face, slow and assessing, the way a man looks at horses he's thinking of buying. Depending on what? Someone asked. One of the new men, the other new man, besides you. Drum looked at him for a long moment. Depending on everything, he said, and walked away. The cook's fire is going before the sky's fully light. His name is Abner Tully. He's 61 years old, which makes him the oldest man on the drive, and he runs the chuck wagon with the focused efficiency of someone who has done this many times and has developed strong opinions about precisely how it should be done, and no interest whatsoever in other people's opinions on the subject. He's got the coffee boiling before you've gotten your boots on. The smell of it hits you across 20 yards of still morning air, dark and slightly burnt and more welcome than almost anything you've ever smelled in your life. You've been awake for 20 minutes, lying in the pre-dawn darkness listening to the sounds of 2,000 cattle, breathing and shifting in the holding pens a quarter-mile away. That smell, bovine and dense and faintly rotten, the smell of animals that have been standing in close proximity for days, eating and defecating and existing in each other's proximity. That has been your companion all night. The coffee smell cuts through it like a blade. You get up, roll your bedroll, tie it with the leather strap, carry it to the wagon and throw it on with the others. The morning is cold in a way that surprises you every time. You knew Texas was hot. Everyone knows Texas is hot. But nobody told you that the spring mornings, before the sun comes up, carry a cold that comes off the flatland like it's been stored there overnight. Your hands are stiff. You flex them twice, 3 times. Feel the resistance in the knuckles. Tully hands you a tin cup without looking at you. The handle is hot enough to burn if you grip it wrong. You hold it by the rim, careful. The coffee inside is dark enough to see your reflection in, and strong enough that 2 sips in your chest feels warmer. Around the fire, the other men are doing the same, rolling out of bedrolls, pulling on hats, sitting on their heels or on overturned boxes or just standing. Nobody talks much. There's an understanding in trail camps at this hour that speech requires more energy than anyone has yet accumulated. You look across toward the pens. 2,240 Texas longhorns. You can hear them from here. A low, continuous sound, not quite mooing, more like the combined exhalation of a very large, very alive thing. The sound of that much life concentrated in one space. The smell of them, even at this distance, is a physical presence, hot and grassy, and something underneath that, something older. This smell of wild animals, of something that has not been fully domesticated no matter how long it's been on someone's land. Drum is already at the pens. You can see his silhouette in the early grey light, sitting on the top rail, looking at the herd, just watching them, thinking whatever trail bosses think when they stand at the beginning of 1,700 miles. Here's what you know about cattle drives. You know the basics. You know that Texas longhorns, bred from Spanish stock that escaped and went feral, and then were rounded up and bred again over a century and a half, are different animals from the cattle you grew up around in Kentucky. You know they're tougher, leaner, built for drought and heat and poor forage in a way that eastern cattle simply are not. You know that after the Civil War, Texas was full of cattle and broke, and the North was full of money and needed beef, and that the Chisholm Trail, named for Jesse Chisholm, a Cherokee Scottish trader who used this route for his own wagons in the 1860s, became the channel through which those two facts resolved themselves. You know that hundreds of thousands of cattle have already moved up this trail before you in the years since 1867, when the Kansas Pacific Railroad reached Abilene, and Joseph McCoy built the first proper stockyards and turned the little Kansas cow town into the economic engine of the beef trade. You know what the job pays, $30 a month. The trail boss gets $150. The cook gets about the same as the trail boss, sometimes more, which tells you something about the relative importance of keeping 14 men fed versus keeping 2,000 cattle organized. Here's what you don't know. You don't know what 2,000 cattle in motion feels like from inside it. You don't know what the dust is actually like. Not just the concept of dust, but the specific physical reality of riding drag at the back of a herd, where the 2,000 animals in front of you have churned the dry Texas soil into a suspended cloud that does not blow away because there is no wind, and you ride through it for 8 hours, breathing it, wearing it, tasting it, and when you blow your nose at the end of the day, what comes out is the colour of the earth you've been crossing. You don't know what a longhorn horn can do to a horse's flank if the horse makes a wrong move. You don't know what a river crossing looks like when 2,000 cattle don't want to go in the water. You don't know what a stampede sounds like from the inside. You're about to learn all of these things, one after another, over the next 90 days. But right now you're standing by a fire in the pre-dawn cold in South Texas, and the coffee is the best thing you've tasted in weeks, and the stars are finally fading in the east, and Elias Drum is climbing down from the fence rail and walking toward the camp with the unhurried stride of a man who has started a lot of cattle drives and knows that the first step is no different from any other step, except in the fact of being first. "Mount up," he says. "No preamble. Let's move these cattle." The longhorns do not move like you expected. You expected chaos. You expected the same thing everyone expects who has never done this, which is 2,000 animals running in every direction, while desperate men on horses chase them. That's the picture you had, the picture from the stories. What actually happens is stranger and more interesting. The longhorns, once they're moving, move together. Not because they've been trained to, not because they're following any kind of human direction, not really, because they're herd animals, and 2,000 years of instinct compel them toward the same choice simultaneously. And the choice is to move north, because north is where the animals in front are moving, and where the herd is where safety is. It takes about an hour to get them moving. The point riders, 2 men at the very front, the lead position, the best riders in the crew, work the leaders, the cattle at the front of the herd. These leaders matter more than any other animals in the herd. If you can get the leaders moving in the right direction, the rest follow, almost always. The leaders are usually established within a day or two of a drive starting. Certain animals simply move to the front and stay there, and the herd acknowledges this through some process nobody fully understands but everyone accepts. The swing riders take the sides, the flank riders take the rear sides, and the drag riders, you and one other man, a teenager named Wash Carter from somewhere in West Texas who smells like he's been living outdoors for so long, that outdoor has become his natural state. The drag riders take the back. Nobody wants drag. Drag is where the weakest cattle end up. The sick ones, the lame ones, the ones that are just slower than the rest. Your job is to keep them moving, to push them forward constantly into the mass of the herd, to not let the herd stretch out too much, because a herd stretched thin is harder to manage and more vulnerable to breaking in multiple directions. And drag is where the dust is. The first hour, you don't understand the dust yet. It's unpleasant. You tie your bandana over your nose and mouth like everyone told you to, and you squint through it, and you think, this is manageable. I can do this. By the third hour, you understand the dust. It is not a weather condition. It is an environment. It is the medium through which you exist. When you breathe in, you breathe dust. When you breathe out, you breathe dust with slightly more moisture in it. The bandana, cotton, good cotton, you bought the best you could afford in San Antonio, is doing something but not enough. The dust gets in around the edges, gets in your ears, gets into the corners of your eyes and grinds there. The sun comes up and makes it worse. The heat rises and takes the dust with it, spinning it upward into the air so that instead of a low cloud, you're riding through a column of dust that rises 40, 50 feet above the herd, visible from miles away, a brown pillar moving north across the flat Texas grassland like a biblical signal. We are here. We are moving. This is the trail. Here's something nobody tells you before you come to Texas. Texas is enormous. Not in the way that people say everything is bigger in Texas as a kind of cheerful boast, in an actual practical physical way that takes time to understand. When you're riding through it, in a country this flat with visibility that extends 15 or 20 miles in every direction, and you watch the landscape change, slowly, incrementally, like watching a clock, and it barely changes, you start to understand the scale differently than you did when it was a number on a map. 1,700 miles, at about 12 to 15 miles a day, which is the pace of a cattle drive, because you can't push the animals too fast or they lose weight and arrive thin and are worth less money, and the whole point is to arrive with fat cattle. 1,700 miles is a very long time. 90 days is a very long time. The landscape in South Texas is brushland, thick with mesquite, low and spiny, silver green in colour, filling every space that isn't actively trail with its particular kind of stubborn, rooted presence. The mesquite has thorns that will take a chunk out of your leg if your horse pushes too close to the brush, and thorns that will puncture leather if you're not careful, and a root system that goes deeper than you can dig to find water, which tells you something about how the mesquite has been surviving the Texas drought for several thousand years. The grass, and there's less of it than there used to be, the old hands tell you. The drives in the late 1860s found better grass than this. The trail has been grazed hard and the land is showing it. The grass is brown gold, mid-height, dry enough to crumble in your fingers. In the first 2 weeks, before you cross the Red River and enter Indian Territory, the landscape barely changes. Mesquite and grass, and the dry creek beds, white in the sun, where water runs only after heavy rain, and not at all for most of the year. You start to measure distance differently, not in miles, but in water, in whether the creek on today's map has water in it or not, in whether the herd drank enough yesterday to be manageable today, because a thirsty herd is a dangerous herd. Animals that haven't drunk in a day start to make decisions of their own, and the decisions they make are not always in the direction you want to travel. Drum tells you this on the third day, riding alongside you in the afternoon. He doesn't ride alongside you often. He's usually at the front or ranging ahead to scout. But occasionally he drops back to the drag, and when he does, it means something. "You're riding too wide," he says. "You look at where you are. You're maybe 20 yards from the nearest animals. I thought, you're eating less dust, but you're out of position. When one of those stragglers breaks for the brush, you've got 20 yards to cover before you can turn it. 20 yards on bad ground. Learn the distance." He looks at you with those wind-carved eyes. Close doesn't mean comfortable. Close means where you need to be to do the job. He rides forward without waiting for a response. You move in closer. The dust thickens. You breathe it. You learn the distance. There are 14 of you on this drive, plus the cook and the trail boss. The point riders are two brothers from Gonzales County named Tom and Bill Echeverria. They're Mexican-American, second generation, and they ride like they were born in the saddle, which they more or less were. Tom is 28 and says almost nothing. Bill is 26 and makes up for his brother's silence by talking more or less continuously. Jokes, observations, complaints, opinions on the quality of the grass and the price of beef, and the general injustice of being a point rider on a drive where the trail boss doesn't keep a remeter large enough. They ride together with an unconscious coordination, two bodies acting as a single organism, turning the leaders east or west with small movements that seem like no movement at all. The swing riders are Jim Patterson, a large, quiet man from East Texas with hands so thick that the reins look like string in them, and a man called Dell who's been on 5 drives and has the calm, slightly distant manner of someone who has made peace with the fact that this is simply what his life is going to be. The flank riders are Wash Carter, who you're getting to know, ride by ride, as a person who responds to almost any question with a shrug and almost any hardship with a dry remark, and who is, you're coming to understand, one of the most genuinely competent people you've ever been around in your life. And 3 other men, Hector, Felix, and a man from Missouri named Prentice, who has a prosthetic left hand made from iron and leather, which he manages to rope with just as well as anyone manages with 2. Your drag. You and Wash, in the back, in the dust, with the sick cattle and the weak ones and the ones that want to lie down. And then there's the remuda, the spare horses. No cowboy rides one horse for a whole day on the trail. You swap horses every few hours, rotating through the remuda, because no single horse can do 8 or 10 hours of cattle work and remain sound. The wrangler, a kid called Henry who is 15 and doesn't talk much but handles horses with the tenderness that seems almost parental, manages the remuda while the drive is moving, keeping the spare horses grouped behind the herd, cycling them forward when needed. And there's Drum, Elias Drum. You spend the first week trying to figure out how old he actually is. He said 53. He looks 70 on some mornings when the light is harsh. He looks 45 when he's on a horse doing something that requires quick action. His hands are scarred from some old rope burn on the left, the scar running from the base of his thumb to his wrist, pale and thick. He chews tobacco and doesn't offer it. He makes decisions about the route by looking at the sky and at the ground and at the cattle, in that order. And his decisions are almost always correct, and when they're not, he adjusts without comment. You don't know yet what to make of him. He hasn't said anything particularly useful or unkind. He's just been Drum. Quiet and constant and present in the way that the weather is present. Not friendly, not hostile, simply a force that shapes your days. On the 7th day, you don't find the waterhole where the map said the waterhole would be. It is there in the sense that the depression in the earth is there. The cracked mud at the centre is there. The tracks of animals coming to drink, old tracks, dried and crumbling, are there. The water is not there. The water has been gone for, by the look of the cracked mud, at least 3 weeks. Drum stands at the edge of it for a long moment, looking at it, not saying anything. The herd is gathered 1/2 a mile back, held by the swing riders. 2,000 cattle have walked 12 miles since morning and are beginning to understand, through some collective bovine processing, that there is no water ahead. They're shifting more than usual. The sound of them is different, a lower, more continuous rumble, the sound of restlessness. Next water? Patterson asks. 6 miles, Drum says, if the creek has anything in it. It's been a dry spring. Yes. Drum looks at the sky. He does this often. The sky in South Texas in the spring is doing nothing obvious. High clouds, the sun sliding west, a light wind from the south carrying nothing useful. No smell of rain, no grey build-up on the horizon. We push, he says. 6 miles more tonight. Water or no water, we push. Here's what happens when 2,000 thirsty cattle catch the smell of water. The science of it is simple enough. Longhorns, like all cattle, have an olfactory system that is dramatically more powerful than humans. They can smell water at a distance that would seem impossible if you hadn't seen it yourself. A mile, sometimes more, in the right wind conditions. When the smell hits them, something in the ancient wiring of their brains fires, and the message isn't there's water ahead so much as go there now. The herd breaks. Not into chaos, not yet, not quite. But the leaders at the front begin to move faster, pulling the rest of the herd with them, the way a current in a river pulls everything else. The swing riders see it and push their horses forward, trying to flank, trying to guide. The sound of the herd changes again, louder now, higher, the rumble becoming a rushing sound, hooves quickening on the dry ground. You're in the drag, and you feel it before you hear it fully. A vibration in the ground. Your horse feels it too. Its ears come forward and it sidesteps once, twice. The way horses do when they're making calculations about their own safety. Easy, you say to the horse and to yourself in equal measure. The stragglers at the back, the ones you've been pushing all day, they hear the herd moving faster and they find reserves you didn't know they had. The lame one, the one with the bad left front leg that's been hanging back since noon, breaks into something close to a trot. The group of young steers who've spent the whole day trying to escape into the mesquite are suddenly fully focused, suddenly moving in exactly the right direction. There's something almost funny about it if you're not frightened. The creek has water. Not much. It's barely running. More a series of connected pools than a moving stream, but enough. The leaders reach it and plunge in, drinking desperately, moving their heads in the water, and the rest of the herd pours in behind them, and the creek fills with cattle, and the sound of drinking is enormous. A wet, grateful animal sound that carries across the flat ground as means, at least for tonight, that the crisis has been postponed. You water your horse downstream of the herd, where the water is slightly less churned. You cup some in your own hands, even though Tully told you not to drink from the same sources as the cattle unless you boil it first. You're thirsty enough that you drink anyway, and the water tastes of mud and grass and something mineral, and it is possibly the best water you've ever tasted in your life. On the 11th day, you start to understand horses differently. You grew up with horses. You know how to ride, how to saddle, how to read a horse's mood from the set of its ears and the tension in its neck. This isn't new, but trail driving is hard on horses in ways that are harder and more specific than what you've known before. Each rider has 5 horses assigned to them in the remuda, 5 horses to rotate through over the course of a day's drive. You're responsible for knowing these horses, for knowing which one handles cattle well and which one gets spooky if a steer gets too close, which one is calm in water and which one fights the current, which one you want under you at night if something goes wrong. Your string is a sorrel quarter horse named Red, who is exactly what his name suggests, and is the best cow horse in your string, smart and quick, and absolutely terrified of rivers. A brown mare called Dolly, who will do anything you ask but does it slightly slower than you'd like. A grey gelding named Fog, who has the strange ability to completely ignore what is happening around him, which is a quality you initially find disconcerting and come to find invaluable. A bay horse with no name that everyone just calls Bay, which is sound and reliable, and the kind of horse that exists to demonstrate that reliability is worth more than flair. And a black horse called Sermon, who has enormous energy, enormous opinions, and the habit of trying to bite other horses when he's bored. You ride Red. You're learning to trust the way he reads the cattle, the small shifts of attention in his body that tell you something in the herd is changing before you can see it yourself. He communicates in pressure and movement, in the angle of his ears, in whether he's pulling against the reins or working with them. Wash Carter rides up alongside you one afternoon, on his own point of the rotation, and watches you working a straggler back into the herd. "You're getting better," he says. "It's more or less the highest compliment you've received on this drive." "Getting less bad," you say. He nods. That's apparently sufficient. "Red's testing you," he says. "He's got more in him than you're asking. He knows it. He's deciding if you know it." "How do I tell him I know it?" Wash looks at you. Ask him for more. See what happens. He rides away. His horse is a lean paint that moves like water around obstacles. You look at Red's ears, forward and alert on the straggler ahead. You ask Red for more. He gives it to you immediately, effortlessly, with the smooth acceleration of something that was ready and waiting for you to be ready too. The straggler goes back into the herd. Red's ears swivel back at you for a moment and then forward again. Something has shifted between you. By the 3rd week you've started looking at the cattle differently. Texas longhorns are not like any cattle you grew up with. They are not exactly domesticated animals in the sense that a dairy cow is domesticated. They are something in between. Animals that have been managed by humans long enough to be manageable, but wild enough that the management is always provisional. The horns are the first thing. Not just their size, though the size is remarkable. Some of the older bulls carrying spreads of 4, 5, 6 feet from tip to tip. But the way the animals use them. They use them the way wild animals use their defences. Deliberately. With intention. You've watched a longhorn cow use her horns to move other cattle away from water with the same focused economy that a person uses an elbow in a crowd. Not aggressive exactly, just clear. The older bulls, the ones in the back of the herd where you spend your days, are the ones that require the most attention. Not because they're dangerous in the way that the story of dangerous bulls suggests. They're not particularly interested in you most of the time. It's more that they're interested in their own agenda, which may or may not coincide with the agenda of moving north. And when those two agendas diverge, they diverge with the confidence of an animal that weighs 1,200 pounds and has 6-foot horns and has been surviving without much human help for most of its genetic history. There's one bull in particular that you've named in your head. because it seems impossible not to. He's a dark red animal, almost brown, with horns that turn slightly outward and upward, in a way that gives him a look of permanent skepticism. He's been here before, you think. He's been driven north before at some point because he knows the trail in some deep way that shows in how he moves. Not leading. He's not a leader, but he's not confused either. He moves with the certainty of something that has survived this particular experience before and has made peace with it. You start, by the end of the 3rd week, to think of him as a kind of fellow traveller, not friendly, not hostile, just another creature making its way up this particular stretch of continent for reasons that have been decided by forces neither of you control. You give him a wide berth, and he gives you a wide berth, and this is the entire basis of your relationship. It works fine. On the 22nd day, you reach the Red River. You've been told about the Red River. Every man on this drive has been told about the Red River. The river marks the border between Texas and Indian Territory, and it is, depending on conditions, anywhere between a minor inconvenience and an actual attempt on your life. Today, it is attempting your life. The spring rains upstream have done their work. The Red River at this crossing is running full, muddy reddish-brown from the iron-rich soil of its banks, moving fast with that deceptive smoothness that deep, powerful rivers have, the smoothness that looks calm until you're in it and understand what's beneath. The crossing point is a wide, gravelly ford that in dry seasons is only a few feet deep and a few 100 yards wide. Today the gravel is underwater. The banks are submerged. The river has overflowed into the flat land on both sides, creating a brown, slowly moving flood that extends 50 yards beyond the regular bank. Drum stands at the edge of it for a long time, again with that quality he has of being completely still while he processes something. Tom Echeverria is beside him. Tom is the person Drum talks to when he talks to anyone, which is not often. You ride up close enough to hear them. 3 days, Tom says, meaning how long to wait for it to drop. 3 days we lose weight. 3 days we burn the calendar, Drum spits. What's the bottom like? Sand, mostly, some gravel. It won't hold the heavy ones. Drum looks at the cattle. The cattle are spread along the bank, some of them already at the water's edge drinking, some of them back from it with the manner of animals that can see water and smell water, but are calculating, in whatever way they calculate, the question of whether this particular water situation looks safe. It does not look safe. We go today, Drum says. River crossings on cattle drives are where men drown. Not often, not every crossing, but often enough that every man on this crew knows it, and the knowledge sits in the back of your mind like a stone as you ride into the water alongside the herd. The first thing is the cold. The water is cold in the way that snowmelt is cold. It hasn't had time to warm in the spring sun, and the chill goes through your boots immediately, through your pants, up your legs. Your horse plants its feet and pushes forward, and the current is stronger than it looks. You can feel it in Red's body as he works, the slight sideways drag against the straightforward push. The leaders go in first, pushed by Tom and Bill riding tight alongside, flanking them close. Once the leaders go in, the rest will follow. That's the theory. That's always the theory. The leaders don't want to go. This is the other thing about river crossings. The cattle know. They can feel the current. They can smell the depth of it somehow, or feel it in the air pressure near the surface, or process it through some cattle-specific sense that has no human equivalent. The lead animals stop at the water's edge and the ones behind pile up behind them, and suddenly you have 2,000 cattle crowded at the bank, with the front ones pushing back, and the back one's pushing forward, and the noise of it builds to something that makes your teeth vibrate. Tom rides into the river, into the deep part, the current, the brown moving water. He turns his horse to face the cattle. "Andale!" he shouts, the Spanish carrying authority across the noise. His horse is up to its chest in the water. He's gesturing, demanding. The tone unmistakable. The led steer, a big motley animal that's been at the front of this herd since the first day, makes the decision. It goes in. When the lead steer goes, they all go. 2,000 longhorns entering a swollen river is a sound and a sight that exists outside the category of things you can prepare for. The noise of the water rises immediately, splashing, churning, the heavy thud of hundreds of bodies hitting the surface, the desperate thrashing of animals in water deeper than they expected. The river fills with cattle, with their heads above the water and their legs working beneath, with the current sweeping them slightly downstream of where you want them. Your job is the back, keeping the stragglers moving, keeping the ones at the edge of the bank from turning and bolting. Red enters the water. You feel the moment his feet leave the gravel and his body begins to swim. A change in motion that goes from the rhythm of hooves on ground to the rhythm of swimming. A rolling muscular movement that you feel in your entire body. You lift your feet out of the stirrups and lean forward, and Red swims, and the water is up to your boots, up to your thighs, and the cold of it is something you'll feel in your bones for the rest of the day. The dark red bull, your bull, the one you've been naming in your head, is at the edge of the bank behind you, watching. He watches the herd going in. He watches you going in. Then he makes his decision. The same decision the lead steer made. Some calculation concluding in favour of staying with the herd. And he walks into the river with the deliberate confidence of an animal that has survived this particular challenge before. He can swim. They all can. They don't look like swimmers, but longhorns can swim long distances in current that would kill a person. The hooves work below the surface, the heads stay up, the horns turning this way and that in ways that create hazards for anything within reach. There is a moment in the deepest part of the crossing when Red loses his footing entirely and the current takes you both sideways. You're downstream of the herd. The cattle are around you, their bodies brushing yours as the current sweeps everyone together, and the smell is overwhelming. Wet cattle, river mud, the sharp alkaline smell of the Red River itself. And Red is swimming hard and you're just holding on, just trusting the horse, just staying with the movement, and the far bank is there, still there, only 50 more yards. Red finds the bottom. His hooves hit gravel and he surges forward out of the deep water with a grunt of effort, and you're on the far bank, on the Texas side of Indian Territory, water streaming from your boots, from the saddle, from Red's sides as he blows hard and shakes his head. You turn to look back. The river is full of cattle, hundreds of them, swimming, their heads a moving island above the brown water. Behind them more cattle still pushing in from the bank. On the far side, Tom and Bill are already working the emerging animals, guiding them away from the river's edge to make room. It takes 3 hours. 3 hours to move 2,240 cattle across a swollen river. When the last animal is across, the lame steer from the drag, the one you've spent 3 weeks nursing forward, who turns out to be a surprisingly competent swimmer, you count them. 2,237. 3 animals are gone. You don't ask how. You don't ask where. The river took them. The river is still there, running red and smooth, looking exactly as it did before. Unbothered. Drum counts with you. When he gets to 37, he stops and is still for a moment. "Move them off the bank," he says. "Let them graze. Give them an hour before we move." He rides away without comment on the 3 animals that are gone. You sit on Red in the sun, soaking wet, on the Indian Territory side of the Red River, and feel something inside you change. Something small and permanent. A recalibration. 3 animals. 3 out of 2,240. A small number. A cost of doing this particular business. A number that Elias Drum has absorbed into his accounting without visible distress. But they were real. And the river is still there, and you're going to have to cross more rivers before this is over. North of the Red River, the country changes. The mesquite thins out. The grass is different. Taller, thicker, a deeper green in the spring, the kind of grass that tells you the land hasn't been driven as hard as what's south of the river. The sky is the same enormous sky, the same daily theatre of cloud and wind and light, but the particular quality of the air is different. Less dust in the soil here, less of that desiccated South Texas caliche. You're in Indian Territory now, the land of the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, though territory and civilized are both words that carry more history than the words themselves can easily hold. Drum briefs. The crew on the 3rd morning north of the river, speaking in the flat, factual way he speaks about everything. We're in Cherokee Nation land now. We pay a tax, 10 cents a head, sometimes more. They send riders to count the herd. You will not argue with them. You will not be rude or give them a reason for complaint. You will behave as if you were guests in someone else's country, which you are. He looks at the new men, you particularly. The Cherokee have been here on this land since the 1830s, when the United States removed them from their homes in the East and put them here. They have built towns and schools and law and commerce. They have been farming this land for 40 years. They are not what you think they are, and they are not interested in your opinions about what they are. Questions? No questions. The Cherokee riders come on the 4th day in the territory. 3 men on good horses, wearing the kind of clothes that are neither Eastern nor frontier, but something that is both and neither. Broadcloth coats and wide-brimmed hats, the particular combination of practicality and formality that belongs to people navigating between 2 worlds simultaneously. They count the herd with practiced efficiency, moving along the flanks, tallying on paper. They speak to Drum in English that is as good as his. They are polite and exact. Drum is polite and exact. Money changes hands. The riders depart. The whole transaction takes less than an hour. You watch it from the drag position and feel the particular sensation of having your assumptions revised, not dramatically, not in any way that produces epiphany, just a quiet, grinding revision. Another thing you thought you knew that turns out to be different from how you thought it. The territory is full of things like this. Night on the trail is a different country. The herd is bedded down, mostly. Cattle sleep in small clusters, lying down in groups of 4 or 5, getting up and lying down again through the night in a rotation that no one fully understands, but that seems to serve some function in the collective security of the herd. They are quieter at night, but not silent. The breathing of 2,000 animals in the dark, the occasional low sound, the rustle of movement. It's a constant organic sound, like the earth breathing. The night riders circle the herd, 2 men at a time riding slow circles in opposite directions, passing each other and exchanging nods, maintaining a presence that the cattle can hear and feel, and that serves, in theory, to keep the herd calm. The night riders talk to the cattle. This is not a metaphor. They actually talk in low voices or sing, because the sound of a human voice moving around a perimeter of the herd in the dark is calming in some fundamental bovine way. The cattle can hear someone coming and identify it as a known and non-threatening thing. You're on second watch, midnight to 2. Then Dell takes over for the 4 to 6. The first night you do it, you spend the first 15 minutes intensely alert, watching everything, scanning the darkness for the shapes of cattle that have wandered. You've been told what happens if the herd startles, told in specifics by Patterson, who once lost a horse in a stampede, and the telling has lodged itself somewhere in your body and made you watchful. Then the quality of the night settles over you and you stop fighting it. The moon is up tonight, nearly full. The plains in full moonlight are extraordinary. The grass silver and the cattle's backs catching the light. Their horns occasionally making that particular glint that looks like water. The air is cool and smells of grass and cattle, and the faint mineral smell of the creek you camped beside. Somewhere distant, so distant it might be imagined a coyote. You ride slow. Your voice, when you speak, comes out soft. Easy, easy there, it's all right. You're not sure who you're talking to. The cattle nearest you turn their heads, ears rotating. Then they go back to their own concerns. In the distance, the dying fire of the camp. The chuck wagon a dark shape against the sky. The other men sleeping in their bedrolls, invisible at this distance. This is the thing about the trail that no one tells you before you go. The nights. The specific quality of being awake and moving through a landscape that is utterly indifferent to your presence, in a darkness that is not frightening but simply vast. The sense of your own smallness that is not diminishing, or not only diminishing, but also clarifying. Like the dust in the air burns away at night and you can see exactly what's there. Grass and sky and cattle and the indifferent stars. Drum rides up alongside you about 1 in the morning, which surprises you. You hadn't heard him coming. "How are they?" he says. "Quiet. Wind's from the north, coming down." He tilts his head at the sky. "Is that bad?" He's quiet for a moment. "Wind from the north brings cold. Cold makes them restless. Tonight. Couple days." He rides another circle alongside you. You hear him before you hear anything else. The small, specific sounds of a man who is comfortable in silence but sharing it rather than retreating into it. "First drive?" he asks, though he knows the answer. "Yes, sir." "How's it going?" You think about this honestly. "I'm getting the hang of it. Mostly. The river was harder than I expected." He says nothing. "The dust is..." You start. "The dust is the dust," he says. "You stop noticing it after the first 100 miles. Or you don't. Either way, it doesn't get less." "Did you notice it on your first drive?" "I couldn't see for 3 days," he says. There's something in his voice that might be amusement, or might just be the flat recounting of fact. Hard to tell with Drum. "I was on the trail in 68. The first year we really worked the Chisholm regular. Didn't know anything. Younger than you. What scared you most?" The question surprises you as it comes out. You don't know why you asked it. Drum doesn't answer immediately. You ride in silence for the time it takes to complete half a circuit of the herd. "The river," he says finally. "The big ones. The Cimarron, the Arkansas. When they're running high." A pause. "And storms." "Outlaws?" you ask. He makes a sound that might be a laugh. "Outlaws want your money or your cattle. They're manageable. You can negotiate with a man. You can ride around him or pay him or shoot him if it comes to it." He looks at the sky, north, where the stars are slightly hazier than they were an hour ago. You can't negotiate with the sky, he rides off. You keep circling, the cattle breathe. The night deepens. You think about what he said, about not being able to negotiate with the sky. Another river. The Cimarron in dry years is barely a river at all, more of an intermittent stream, a series of water holes connected by sand and dried mud, and the danger in dry years is not the water but the lack of it. Crossing the Cimarron desert stretch, the 60-mile waterless section that's the most feared part of the trail in drought conditions. This is not a dry year. The Cimarron in this spring is a different animal entirely. It runs full and deceptive, the colour of coffee with cream, the banks cut steep on both sides from the recent flooding. The bottom is quicksand in places. Everyone knows this. Everyone is told this. Drum specifically names the quicksand in his pre-crossing briefing. And the worst possible outcome is a large animal finding it. You cross in the morning, which Drum chooses deliberately, in full daylight, so that any problems can be seen and responded to before they compound in the dark. The crossing is harder than the Red River. It's not wider or deeper necessarily, but the bottom is wrong. You can feel it through Red's feet, the way the ground shifts and gives slightly with each step, the way there are places where Red pushes forward and his hoof sinks more than it should before finding something solid. Red knows. He keeps looking down, which horses don't normally do, a behaviour that in a horse means I'm aware of the ground under me, and I'm making specific calculations about it. 3 steers find the quicksand. The first one is at the edge of the main crossing, where the sand is softest. It steps in and immediately begins to sink, and the specific motion of it is unlike anything you've seen. Not a falling, but a slow, inexorable descent. The animal's weight working against it, each attempt to lift a leg pulling it deeper in the other direction. The steer doesn't understand what's happening. Its eyes are wide. Prentice is there before anyone else. He's already got his rope out, already in motion, and the loop goes over the steer's horns on the first throw, which, given that he's doing it with a prosthetic left hand, is possibly the most impressive roping you've ever seen. He takes 2 wraps around his saddle horn, and his horse sits back on the rope and pulls while Prentice shouts commands, and the steer fights the sand and the rope in opposite directions. It comes out, eventually, with a sucking sound that you feel in your chest. The steer stands on solid ground, shaking, covered in the grey sand, and after a moment it walks forward as though nothing happened. The second steer comes out similarly, though it takes 3 men and 15 minutes and leaves the steer so exhausted it can barely walk. The third steer doesn't come out. It finds a section of the deepest quicksand, a section Drum didn't know was there because it wasn't there the last time he used this crossing, and it sinks fast and the ropes can't find purchase on it before it's too deep. Drum watches from the bank. He tells the men to stop trying. He watches the animal go. Nobody says anything. This is not the first animal lost on this drive, and it will not be the last. These are the numbers of the trail, the arithmetic of cattle driving, the built-in losses that everyone accepts as the cost of moving livestock across a continent. But acceptance doesn't make it comfortable to watch. Move them out, Drum says. His voice has exactly the same weight it always has, which means either that it costs him nothing, or that he's spent 30 years building a face that doesn't show what it costs. You move them out. It's the Cimarron that teaches you the smell. You're 2 days past the river when you first notice it. In the late afternoon, the heat of the day beginning to ease, the cattle moving well through good grass, everything more or less as it should be, and there's a smell in the air that you can't place, not rain exactly. Not the specific clean smell of rain coming. That, you've learned by now, the slight sharpening of the air, the way the grass seems to brighten slightly before the first drops come. This is different. Something electric. Something sharp and mineral and big. Red notices it before you do. His ears go forward and his head comes up, and his stride shortens in that particular way that means the horse has clocked something that the rider hasn't processed yet. You look north. The horizon is clear. Sky and grass and nothing else. You look south. South is where the weather comes from when it's not coming from the north, and south shows you nothing either. West. West. The sky to the west has a quality you've never seen before. Not dark exactly. Not the deep grey of ordinary storm clouds. This is different. A green-yellow cast to the light. The way a bruise looks against skin. Wrong-coloured in a way that makes your eyes keep coming back to it, trying to make sense of the wrongness. Patterson rides up alongside you without being asked. You see it, he says. It's not a question. What is that? Thunderstorm. He's watching the west with an expression that is fully neutral in the way that full neutrality means something is being suppressed. Big one. How long? Couple hours, maybe 3. Depends how fast it's moving. He watches a moment longer. It's moving. You can see it now. The green-yellow light intensifying. The cloud wall, because that's what it is, you see it now. Not a flat mass, but a wall. A vertical structure that goes from the ground to somewhere higher than you can track. Built from the top down by some atmospheric process that has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with what happens to the flat land of the Great Plains, when hot, wet Gulf air meets cold, dry air coming south off the Rockies. Does Drum know, you ask? Drum knew an hour ago, Patterson says. Stop for a moment and understand what a Great Plains thunderstorm actually is, because the word storm isn't adequate. You grew up with storms, Kentucky storms, the kind that come in fast and drop a lot of rain and knock a few branches down and are gone in an hour. You know thunder and lightning. You know what it means to be caught outside in weather. The Great Plains does not do storms the way Kentucky does storms. The plains are flat. The atmosphere over the plains in late spring is a pressure cooker of competing air masses, and when they collide the result is not scaled to anything you've encountered. These storms are 60, 70 miles wide. They produce lightning at a rate of several strikes per second. They produce hail the size of walnuts, occasionally the size of apples, falling at speeds that can break bones. They produce winds that the weather doesn't bother escalating toward. They just arrive. 30 miles an hour, 50, 70. They produce, in the worst cases, walls of lightning so continuous that the horizon looks like a burning city. And they produce, by the movement of electricity through the air before they arrive, a static charge that builds in everything around you, in the grass, in the cattle, in your horse, in you. When that charge builds high enough, it discharges. This is lightning. When it discharges through a longhorn steer, which standing in a flat field is among the tallest objects available, the steer is dead before it knows anything happened. When a steer is struck and killed in a herd of 2,000 nervous cattle at 10 o'clock at night, the other 2,000 cattle hear it and they run. This is a stampede. This is what Elias Drum has been thinking about since he was 20 years old and watched his first trail boss try to stop one. This is the thing cowboys are afraid of more than any outlaw on the trail. Drum runs the crew through the pre-storm routine without dramatics. Move the herd to open ground, he says, pointing northwest. where the grass extends flat and unbroken for as far as the light shows. Away from the creek, away from the trees, we want them where we can see them. The herd is moved. It takes longer than the usual routine because the cattle are already edgy, already picking up the change in air pressure, already reacting to whatever they're sensing in ways you can see in the way they move. Heads up more than usual, the nervous sideways look that means eyes wide and watching. The grass underfoot is doing something strange. In the waning afternoon light you can see it moving. Not in wind, because there's almost no wind right now. That particular eerie calm that sometimes precedes large weather, but with a faint rhythmic flutter that doesn't have a clear source. Is the grass moving? Henry asks. He's on his horse at the edge of the remuda, watching. Static, Patterson says. Electricity in the air. Don't touch the wire picket lines. Henry looks at the picket lines holding the remuda horses. Iron wire staked to the ground. Seriously? Touch it and find out. Henry does not touch it. The horses in the remuda are not calm. They're bunched at the centre of the picket, as far from the wire as the lines allow, their ears pinned, their nostrils wide. Fog, your grey, the one with the ability to ignore everything, is looking at the western sky with an expression that is, for Fog, the equivalent of screaming. You check your own position. You're on Red, who is taut with something held together tightly, his entire body a question about when and whether to run. Easy, you tell him, we're staying. His ears flick back at you and forward again. The sun goes behind the cloud wall. The temperature drops 5 degrees in 3 minutes. The change is physical. You feel it on your hands, on your face, a cold coming on quickly. This is where it starts, Dell says. He's been on 5 drives, remember. He's seen this before. His voice has that calm of something seen before. Not calm of unconcern, calm of I know what happens next. Move with the herd, Drum says. Stay paired. If it goes, stay together. Stay riding. Don't try to stop them alone. Go with them until you can turn them. Mill them, Tom says. Mill them, Drum confirms. Milling is the trail driver's technique for stopping a stampede. You ride alongside the lead animals and push them to the right, gradually, persistently, not sharply enough to trigger panic, pushing them into a tightening circle until the herd is running in circles rather than running away from you. Eventually the circle tightens enough that the animals stop because they're pressing against each other. Milling. The word means grinding, like grain, and watching it apparently looks like a mill, a circular churning that gradually decelerates. It only works if the riders can get to the leaders. It only works if you can outrun the front of a panicking stampede and position yourself beside the leaders. It only works, in other words, if everything goes right. Things do not always go right. The first lightning strike hits when you're still in this pre-storm calm. It comes from the cloud wall to the northwest, a branch of white light that connects sky to earth about 2 miles away. The crack and the boom arrive separately, a half-second between them. The sound is not like the rolling thunder you're used to. It's explosive. It's local. It sounds like something very large tearing in half. 2,000 cattle raise their heads simultaneously. The wind hits first, not a wind that builds up the way a weather change usually works, starting light and increasing. This wind arrives as if someone opened a door. One moment, still. Next moment, 30 miles an hour, sustained from the northwest, carrying cold and electricity and the smell of rain and something else. Something like ozone and burning air. Red spins sideways under you. You correct automatically. the way 3 weeks of trail work has trained you to correct. With your weight, with your legs, with your hands soft on the reins, because a tight rein right now would tell the horse that your fear matches its fear, and that would not help anyone. Easy, you say. The wind takes your voice immediately. The rain starts, not gradually, not the polite precursor drizzle. A solid curtain of rain, heavy drops that hit so fast they sting, soaking through your shirt in 30 seconds, through your hat in less. Lightning, the serious lightning, begins. Strike after strike, 5 seconds apart, then 3 seconds, then continuous enough that the western horizon is lit without pause. The thunder becomes a constant roar with distinct explosions embedded in it, each strike adding its particular violence to the whole. The herd is moving, not running yet, but moving, all of them on their feet, shifting, the herd contracting and then expanding in a wave, the way schools of fish react to something without any individual fish making a decision. You can feel it. Something happening in the mass of 2,000 animals that is moving toward a specific thing, and the specific thing it's moving toward has a name, you know. Hold them, Drum's voice. From somewhere in the dark and the rain and the lightning, the loudest you've ever heard him, which means something because Drum is not a shouting man. Hold them together! You ride Red hard toward the nearest cluster of cattle, pushing them back into the mass. Your motion is reflexive now, not thought, just response, the instinct that 3 weeks of trail work has built in the place where deliberation used to be. A lightning strike 300 yards to your left, close enough that you hear the specific crack of it before the thunder, close enough that you see, in the white instant of it, the grass for 100 yards around the strike point flattening outward, and the rain made silver in the flash. The herd breaks. There is no word for this sound. Later you'll try to describe it, to people who ask, to yourself in the quiet hours, to whoever you might eventually tell this story to, and you'll fail every time, because the sound of a stampede is not in any category of sounds you have language for. It's not like thunder. It's not like an explosion. It's not like any single thing. It's more like the earth itself is changing state, like the ground beneath you has decided to become water, and the water is moving, and it's moving in one direction, and that direction is away from the lightning, and away from the storm, and it is north. 2,000 longhorns at a full run. The vibration comes up through Red's hooves into your body, through the saddle, into your legs, into your chest, into the base of your skull, a frequency that is half sound and half something more physical than sound, something you feel in your teeth. Red is running before you consciously decide to run. He has made his own calculation, and the calculation is that staying with this herd is better than being left behind in the dark with a storm, and his calculation is correct. You're running. The whole crew is running. The herd is running. The world is rain and lightning and the sound of 4,000 hooves on flat ground, and the particular darkness between lightning strikes that is so dense after the brightness that it's essentially blindness. This is where men die. Not from the stampede directly usually. Not from being struck by lightning, though that happens. From falling. From a horse losing its footing in the dark and the mud and going down, and the rider going over and 2,000 animals coming behind them. The thing about a stampede at night is that you cannot see the ground. You ride on Red's judgment. His eyes in the dark are better than yours. His feel for the footing is better than yours. You make yourself a passenger, not passive, because your weight still steers. Your legs still communicate, but passive in the sense that you're not leading this. Red is leading this. You're a partnership in which red has the most relevant information. Lightning strike. Half a second of white light. You see the herd in it, the backs of animals stretching ahead of you to the edge of visibility, a moving plane of dark bodies, the horns catching the light, and on the right flank 2 riders, Tom and Bill, already working their way toward the leaders, already beginning the work of turning them. Dark again. Running. You're at the edge of the herd, the right edge, near the flank. Your job right now, drums voice from what feels like a long time ago, though it was 30 seconds ago, is to stay on the outside of the right flank and push inward, to contain, to narrow the herd's path so it doesn't spread and thin and become impossible to turn. You push Red closer, he goes, ears flat, head down. The cattle on your left are a wall of dark moving mass. The smell of them, panicking, is enormous. The smell of fear, which is real and specific, a sharp, dark smell that you'll recognize forever after. The sound of their hooves, the clatter and thunder of it. Another lightning strike, this one behind you. The thunder is immediate, the strike close, and in the flash you see a steer directly beside you stumble and go down, and Red leaps it. You feel the moment of air beneath you as Red clears the animal. The sudden lurch of landing. Red catching himself and running again in a single fluid motion. You realize you're screaming. Not from fear, or not only from fear, but from the effort of it. The way you'd scream lifting something heavy. An involuntary sound. Finding Tom in the dark is like finding a specific fish in a moving river. You hear him before you see him, his voice carrying in the wet air, the specific Spanish-inflected calling he uses with cattle, a sound that cuts through the thunder and the hoofbeats. You push Red toward it, threading between the animals at the right flank, and then you see the light of his horse's movement in a lightning flash close. Tom is riding alongside the lead animals, not ahead of them. Ahead would mean getting trampled. Alongside them, at speed, his horse matching the leader's pace, and he's pushing them right. Small pushes, his horse's shoulder against the nearest steer's flank, pushing, turning. The lead animals are aware of him, their instinct to veer away from the pressure, and slowly, incrementally, painfully over the distance of a quarter mile, they're curving. Bill is on the other side. You understand without being told to go to the left side of this turn, to reinforce it, to be another pressure point that confirms the direction. You push Red into position and push the cattle, and Red pushes and the cattle push back. And there's a moment where you're close enough to the animals around you that you can feel their breath, can feel the heat of their bodies, can feel the displacement of air as 1,200-pound animals move at full speed within feet of your horse's body. Red holds. He holds because he's a good horse, and because whatever combination of breeding and experience and relationship between horse and rider that constitutes trust, you two have it, worked into the muscle memory of 3 weeks of trail work, of closed distances and earned confidence. The turn starts to work. The leaders are curving right. The herd behind them is curving right. The right flank is compressing inward. This is the beginning of the mill. It takes, in your experience of it, in the adrenaline-stretched time of it, approximately 3 years. In reality, probably 20 minutes. The curve tightens, the speed decreases. The animals in the outer ring start to slow because the animals in the inner ring have slowed, and there's nowhere to run to because the circle closes and every direction is another animal. The roar of hoofbeats changes, becomes less directional, becomes circular, the mill. The rain lets up about an hour after the herd stops moving. The storm moves northeast, the way plain storms move, relentlessly, without backward glance, taking its lightning with it, leaving behind a sky that clears in sections, stars reappearing from west to east as the cloud wall recedes, the air washed clean and cold and smelling of wet grass. The herd is standing, blown, heads down, some of them still trembling in the way large animals tremble after exertion, all the muscles working at once, a full-body shiver that's not cold but exhaustion. The men are checking horses, checking themselves, calling to each other in the dark. Patterson, here. Henry, here. Remuda's scattered. Need to find 3 horses. Dell, here. Hector, here. Felix. A pause, longer than the others. Felix. Longer. Felix. Your stomach drops. Here. Felix's voice from somewhere north of the herd, hoarse. I'm here. My horse is down. The collective exhalation of a group of people who are holding their breath without knowing it. You find Felix on the far north side of where the mill ended. He's standing next to his horse, a roan that has been with this drive since Texas, which is lying on its side in the wet grass, breathing hard and fast, its near foreleg extended at an angle that is wrong. Drum arrives before anyone else. He gets down from his horse and crouches next to the roan's head, running his hands along the leg. The horse doesn't fight him. It's too tired and too pained to fight. Drum is quiet for a long moment. Went down in the run? He asks Felix. Stepped in a dog hole, Felix says. His voice is tight. About a mile back. I came off the front. She didn't fall on me. A pause. She got back up and ran about a half mile with it like this before she slowed. Drum stands up. He looks at the leg. He looks at the horse's face. She won't trail on this, he says. It's not a question. Felix knows this. Everyone knows this. A horse with a fractured leg in 1873 in the middle of the Oklahoma Territory has one future, and it has nothing to do with the trail. Drum does it himself. He takes out the pistol he carries, a Colt, the same revolver that everyone on this drive carries for exactly this kind of purpose, and he puts his hand on the roan's neck for a moment before he does it. The shot is muffled in the wet air. The horse is still. Get Felix on a spare from the remuda, Drum says. He holsters the pistol. Then start counting the herd. I want numbers at first light. He walks away. Felix stands next to his dead horse. He doesn't move for a while. No one disturbs him. You've worked next to Felix for 3 weeks. You know his horse's name was Bay. Same as your own unnamed Bay. But this Bay had a different history, a different relationship. You don't say anything to Felix. There's nothing to say. You stand near him for a while and then you move away to start counting cattle, which is what Drum asked for and what needs doing. First light counting. 2,221. 17 missing. 17 animals gone in the stampede. Scattered in the dark, lost in the grass. Gone in the direction they ran toward until there was no one to turn them and no herd pulling them, and they just ran until they stopped and found themselves alone on the flat land. Some of them will be found. When the sun comes up and the grass is visible, riders go out in expanding circles and find some scattered animals. 2 here, 5 there, and bring them back. By noon of the day after the storm, you've recovered 8. 9 are gone. 9 animals on top of the 3 from the Red River and the 1 from the Cimarron. 13 animals total out of 2,200. Just over 0.5%. Drum records it in the ledger he keeps in the chuck wagon with the same handwriting he uses for everything. Precise, small, economical. You sit by the fire the morning after the storm drinking coffee that Tully made without comment, without reference to what happened in the night, because Tully is a professional and the coffee is what's needed and he made it. Your hands are shaking. Not badly, just slightly. The fine tremor of someone whose adrenaline is still metabolizing hours after the event. You hold the tin cup with both hands and feel the warmth of it and drink. Wash Carter sits down next to you. He's bruised. Somewhere in the dark he took a hit from a horn or a collision, or just the general violence of the night, a purple mark running up the left side of his neck. He pours coffee into his own cup, drinks. You turned them, he says. Tom turned them. You were there. He drinks again. You held the right flank. I saw you. You say nothing. Red held, he says. Red held, you agree. Wash nods. He leans back against the wheel of the chuck wagon and looks at the sky, which is, this morning, the specific clear blue that comes after a storm has scrubbed everything clean. A sky that looks new. When I was on my first drive, Wash says, which is the most personal sentence you've ever heard from him. We had a stampede east of Wichita, end of the drive. 3 days from the pens. I fell off my horse in the dark and landed wrong and lay in the grass while the herd went over me. He says this in exactly the same tone he uses for everything else. The gap between two animals was about this wide. He holds his hands about 2 feet apart. I was in that gap. Just luck. Just luck, you say. Just luck, he agrees. He finishes his coffee and stands up. Today's another day. He walks away toward the horses. The land north of the Cimarron changes again. By the 6th week of the drive, you're deep in the Oklahoma prairies, though Oklahoma isn't a state yet, is just a name attached to the southern part of the territory, and won't be organized as its own territory for another 16 years. The landscape here is what the word prairie was made for. Grass to the horizon in every direction. Nothing else. No trees except along the creek bottoms. No topography except the shallow creases of dry draws and the occasional swell that passes for a hill in a country this flat. The herd moves through it like something that belongs to it, which the longhorns do, in a way. Their ancestors grazed these grasses. The drive is, seen from one angle, just a brief domesticated interruption in a longer story about these particular animals and this particular landscape. A story that goes back further than the United States, further than the Spanish, further than the Cherokee and the Comanche and everyone else who has moved across this land. You ride through it and feel something you don't have a word for. Not peace exactly, not comfort. Something more like acceptance. The way you accept a large thing that can't be changed. The flatness of the land, the size of the sky, the indifference of the weather. After the storm, after the stampede, after the rivers, something in you has recalibrated toward acceptance of these facts. The dust has stopped bothering you. Tully pointed this out a week ago, not with praise, but with the flat observation of a man cataloguing change. You're not coughing in the morning anymore. Give it another month and you won't notice it at all. You don't notice it anymore. This is either adaptation or damage, probably both. The cattle are trail-hardened now, thinner than they were at the start. The drive burns weight off them, which is one of the great frustrations of the business, driving animals 2 months to market only to have them arrive lighter than they left, but tougher. The lame steer from your drag, the one you've been nursing for weeks, has either healed somewhat or simply stopped caring about the lameness, because it moves at the pace of the herd now, no longer falling back. You've developed a thing with the dark red bull. Not a friendship. He's a steer going to slaughter, and you're the hired help moving him there, and neither of you is confused about this. But something. An understanding of respective positions. You know where he'll be in the herd, and he knows you. He no longer eyeballs you when you push up alongside him. He simply continues walking. Here is the thing about 90 days that no one tells you. The extraordinary days, the rivers, the storms, the stampede, those are the ones you'll tell stories about. Those are the ones with enough drama in them to survive the translation into language. The other days, the ordinary days, those are the majority of the drive. 60, 70 of them. Days that begin with cold and coffee and stiffness in your hips, and end with cold and more coffee and deeper stiffness in everything. Days where the herd moves well, and the weather is hot, and the dust is heavy, and the miles add up in the incremental way that miles add up when you're moving at 3 miles an hour through a landscape that doesn't rush you. Those days teach you something different than the dramatic ones. They teach you what the job actually is, stripped of anything that could be called excitement. The job is repetition. The job is doing the same thing 8 hours in a row. The job is maintaining attention through the hours when nothing is happening, the hours when the herd is moving smoothly and the sky is clear and there's no reason for anything to go wrong, because nothing going wrong doesn't mean nothing is going to go wrong. The hardest skill on the trail, you're learning, isn't riding in a stampede or crossing a river. It's staying awake and attentive on a Tuesday afternoon in the Oklahoma Territory, when everything is fine and has been fine for 3 days, and might be fine for 3 more. Patterson tells you this explicitly on one of those fine Tuesday afternoons. The days it goes wrong are always the days it looked like it wasn't going to go wrong, he says. He's riding alongside you in the drag position, which he does sometimes when it's not his watch, just because he finds the drag relaxing. Days it looks bad, you're already ready. Days it looks fine, that's when you go slack. You can't stay tight every day, you say. No, he agrees, you can't, but you can stay present. He taps his temple, watching, not worried, just watching. You think about this for a long time, not worried, just watching. The herd moves, the dust settles and rises, the grass passes under Red's hooves mile by mile. Somewhere around the 60th day, you're on night watch alone. Dell was supposed to come out at 2 and he didn't, and you're not going to go wake him because Dell is Dell and he's earned his sleep, and the herd is quiet tonight with the full moon painting the grass silver, and you're riding slowly and watching. Something happens that you're not able to explain, then or later. The sky's doing what it always does. The Milky Way exactly where it always is. The planets in their configurations, the whole enormous machinery of the universe operating at its usual scale. And you're riding Red through the moonlit grass, and the herd is breathing around you, and something resolves. You've been unhappy, on and off through this drive. Homesick in a way you didn't expect to be, since you were already somewhat removed from home before this. You'd been in San Antonio for 8 months, and Kentucky was already fading into something that happened to an earlier version of yourself. But the trail drive has done something more complete to that earlier self. 70 days in, and the person who stepped on the wagon to San Antonio, 19 and confident and knowing absolutely nothing, is not available anymore. He's been replaced by something less confident in specific ways and more confident in other ways. You can sit on a horse for 12 hours and not be destroyed by it. You can smell the weather coming. You can read cattle the way you used to read people, through small signs, through shifts of attention, through the subtle language of living things that are content or unsettled. You can cross a river. You can find your way back through a stampede in the dark. You didn't know any of this about yourself. You couldn't have known it. The only way to learn it was to do it, which means the person on the other side of the doing is unavoidably different from the person who started. The stars are enormous and indifferent and beautiful. You ride slowly through the sleeping herd, Red's hooves soft on the nighttime grass, and you think about where you'll be in 10 years. You don't know, can't know. But the inability to know doesn't frighten you the way it used to, in that dim background hum way that futures have of frightening you when you're young and too aware of how much can go wrong. Something has shifted in the direction of, I can handle the things that happen, not invulnerability, not confidence that nothing will go wrong, just the specific, earned knowledge that things go wrong and you handle them, that the river rises and you cross it, that the storm comes and you hold the flank, that the horse falls and you don't, that you keep moving, you finish your watch at 4. Dell comes out at 4, sheepish. Sorry, he says. It's fine, you say. It was a good watch. He looks at you, trying to determine if you're being sarcastic, deciding you're not. Yeah, he says. Sometimes they are. By the 7th week, you've started to notice something about the herd that you can't quite name. The cattle have settled into the drive, the nervousness of the early weeks, the alertness to every unfamiliar sound, the tendency to bunch and press and shift, has been replaced by something more like routine. They know the pattern of the day now. They know the sound of the crew, the specific sounds of specific horses, the particular way the chuck wagon rattles on its wheels and the way Drum's horse moves. They're not relaxed exactly. Longhorns aren't relaxed animals, and the ghost of the stampede is still in them, lodged somewhere in their instincts. But they're calmer. The dark red bull has taken a position slightly behind and left of the lead animals that he seems to have decided is his. Not the front. He doesn't push to the front, but close enough to the front to be in the first response of any directional change, the way a cautious person positions themselves slightly back from a door in a crowded room. Present, prepared. You've watched him enough to know what he does when something changes in the herd's mood. When the animals at the front slow, he slows. When they quicken, he quickens. When something in the air changes, a smell, a sound, a shift in wind, his head comes up before most of the others, and he turns to look at the source. He has survived the Red River and the Cimarron and the stampede. He has, in your estimation, survived other things before this drive, other encounters with whatever the world of a longhorn steer brings. Drought, predators, the general difficulties of survival in South Texas for an animal that is, in important ways, still semi-wild. He's very old, for a steer. Someone has miscounted somewhere, or calculated wrong, because he should have been at market years ago. But here he is. Here you both are. The thought lands lightly, without weight. Here we both are. There is no ceremony at the border. You cross from Indian Territory into Kansas on a Thursday, somewhere on a stretch of flat grassland that looks identical on both sides, and the only way you know is that Drum, riding ahead, turns in his saddle and says it. Kansas. He says it the way he says everything else, as fact, without emphasis. You look at the ground on the Kansas side and the ground on the Indian Territory side, and there's no difference you can see. Same grass, same sky, same sun. But something changes in the feel of the day anyway, something in the crew. Not celebration. It's too early for celebration. Abilene is still 3 days away, and 3 days is enough time for anything to go wrong, and the trail has taught you not to count anything until you've counted it. But something lightens, a small collective exhaling. Patterson whistles a few bars of something tuneless. Hector grins across the herd at Felix, and Felix grins back. Even Tom Echeverria, who is the least expressive person you've ever met, sits differently in his saddle. Fractionally upright, the posture of someone approaching the end of something rather than the middle of it. Tully makes a better dinner than usual. He doesn't explain why. He makes a stew with dried apples in it, which he produces from somewhere in the chuck wagon with the air of a man who has been waiting for the right moment to deploy this resource. Nobody comments on the apples, everyone eats more than usual. Drum says, over coffee, 3 days, the grass is good here, slow pace, let them put weight back on. He's thinking about the price per head at the Abilene pens. He's thinking about those 13 dead animals and the 9 lost in the stampede. He's thinking about how much weight the herd has lost in 90 days and how much they can recover in 3. You eat your stew with dried apples in it and think about a bed that isn't a bedroll on the ground and something to drink that isn't creek water or camp coffee. Abilene announces itself from 12 miles away. Not visually, not yet, by smell. You've grown accustomed to the smell of cattle. You've been inside the smell of cattle for 3 months and your nose has made its adjustment and it's become the baseline, the neutral, the way the smell of your own house becomes neutral to you. You don't notice it. You notice it now. The holding pens south of Abilene carry the concentrated smell of every herd that's come through here in the months before you. The accumulated testimony of hundreds of thousands of longhorns compressed into a smell that hits the flat Kansas air and spreads outward like ripples on still water. The herd smells it too. They quicken, not in alarm, in something different. Something almost social, the smell of their own kind in quantity. The leaders push forward, the rest follow the leaders. You're in the drag, and you watch the herd accelerate in front of you, pulling away from the drag riders, the distance increasing, and you don't fight it today. Today you let it happen. Let them move. Red feels it under you, the change in the herd, the pull of it, and moves forward too, his stride lengthening, his head high. This sky over Abilene is full of smoke and dust and the sounds of commerce. You can hear it before you see it. Not any specific sound, but the sound of a town, the accumulated noise of many people and many animals in a concentrated space, different from the space of the trail. And then the town comes into view. It is smaller than you expected and larger than you expected simultaneously. The buildings along the main street are wood, most of them false-fronted, the fronts taller than the actual structures behind them, the architectural equivalent of performing largeness. The Texas street saloons are doing business even at mid-morning. You can hear the tinny sound of a piano from one of them as you ride past the edge of town, parallel to it, moving toward the stockyards. The smell of the stockyards is almost theological in its intensity. The pens hold thousands of cattle, the accumulated wealth of dozens of drives that reached Abilene before you. McCoy's yards, Joseph McCoy's original stockyards, built in 1867 and expanded every year since, stretch for what seems like acres, wooden fencing in complex geometric patterns, penned animals as far as you can see. The cattle buyers are already at the fence when Drum rides in. You watch from a distance while Drum negotiates. You're not invited. You're not expected. Negotiating price per head with a cattle buyer at the Abilene pens is Drum's work. arrived at by the kind of expertise that comes from 40 drives and 30 years of understanding what Texas beef is worth, and what a Kansas broker thinks it's worth, and the distance between those two numbers where the trade happens. It takes 2 hours. You spend those 2 hours helping move the herd into the pens, which is its own chaos. 2,000 plus animals that have spent 3 months moving forward in one direction are suddenly asked to move sideways into smaller spaces through gates that are too narrow for comfort. The cattle don't enjoy this. Your job is to convince them it's happening anyway. When the last gate closes, you ride out of the pen and sit on red at the fence line. 2,221 cattle in the pens, minus the 3 lost to the Red River, the 1 to the Cimarron, the 9 to the Stampede, plus the 8 recovered from the Stampede. The dark red bull is in there. You can see his colour moving among the others in the far pen. He doesn't know what the pens mean. Or maybe, having done this before, he does. You can't tell. You sit there for a moment. Drum rides out of the buyer's office, puts the signed papers in his coat and rides toward the crew. $32 a head, he says. The math runs through the group instantly, the way numbers travel in a crew that has been living on their wages for 3 months. 2,221 head at $32 each. 71,000, Dell says. He's quick with numbers. Give or take, Drum says. He looks at the pens, then at the crew. Something in his face this once is different from its usual flatness. Something has moved slightly behind it. Good drive, he says. That's all he says. But from Drum, that's everything. Your wages for 90 days of trail work come to $27 after the deductions Drum takes for a replacement saddle you needed after yours was destroyed in the river crossing, and a length of rope, and 2 nights in the Abilene boarding house that Drum negotiates as part of the crew arrangement. $27. You stand in the street in Abilene, Kansas, on the evening of your arrival, and you hold them in your hand. Some silver, some paper. $27. In San Antonio, in your 8 months there before the drive, you made about the same. $4 a week at the stables where you worked before signing on with Drum. $27 is 2 months of that work. It is the accumulated payment for 3 months of dust and rivers and night watch and stampede, and the particular grinding repetition of days that were not extraordinary, but were everything the job actually required. $27. You put it in your inside coat pocket and button the button over it and feel the small weight of it against your chest. Tom Echeverria passes you in the street. "Saloon," he says, gesturing. He says this with the air of a man who has made this exact gesture at this exact location after this exact distance travelled several times before. "Give me a few minutes," you say. He nods and walks on. You stand in the Abilene street alone for a few more minutes. The town is loud. The Texas street saloons are doing full business, the sounds of celebration and argument and music spilling out into the evening air. Cowboys who finished their drives a week or 2 before you are still here, working through their wages, doing the things that people do after 3 months of nothing but work and sky. Somewhere in those pens, 2,000 head of Texas longhorns are waiting. Tomorrow the cattle buyers will start moving them. Some will go by rail, east toward the Chicago slaughterhouses. Some will go north to Wyoming and Montana, bought by ranchers to seed new herds in the northern territories. The dark red bull will go somewhere. Not back to Texas, probably. Somewhere else. His road north ends here. You think about this for a moment and then you stop thinking about it. Because there's no version of thinking about it that changes anything, and the evening is warm after the cold nights on the trail, and the piano from the nearest saloon is actually playing something good, and Tom Echeverria is waiting. You button your coat tighter over the $27 and walk toward the lights. In the saloon, late in the evening, you're at a table with Tom and Bill Echeverria and Dell and Wash Carter, and you're drinking the first cold beer you've had in 3 months, and it's doing what cold beer does after 3 months of trail coffee and creek water. It's extraordinary is what it is, in the specific way that ordinary things become extraordinary when you've been without them long enough. The conversation moves around the table in the easy way of people who've lived close for 90 days and have run out of small talk and are now operating in something more basic. Wash is talking about his next drive. He's already thinking about it. He's thinking about a different route, going west on the Western Trail instead of the Chisholm, which he's heard has better water in dry years. He's thinking about whether the northern markets are paying better than Abilene for the second half of the season. Tom is drinking steadily and not talking, which is his mode. Bill is talking enough for both of them. Dell is talking about going home. He's got a wife in East Texas. He's done 5 drives now and he's thinking about whether he wants to do a 6th, whether there's a version of the next part of his life that involves a different relationship to the ground beneath him, specifically staying on it rather than moving across it for 90 days at a stretch. What'll you do? He asks you. Head back to Texas? Another drive next season? You think about this. 3 months ago, the answer would have been automatic. Of course, yes. Another drive, more money, more experience. Now you hold the question a little differently. Maybe, you say. Maybe means yes, Wash says, without looking up from his beer. Maybe means I haven't decided. First drive always does this, Bill says. Makes you think about it. Second drive, you don't think about it. You just go. What's the difference between the first and the second? The first one, you're learning whether you can do it, Dell says. The second one, you already know. It's just a job. You sit with this. Just a job. After the rivers and the stampede and the nights and the dust and the miles and red and the dark Red Bull and the sleep you didn't get and the sleep you did get, looking at the most stars you've ever seen. Just a job. Maybe that's what it becomes. Maybe the extraordinary thing about the first time is exactly that. The first time. The second time. You know the rivers and the storms and the weight of 3 months moving through you, and knowing them changes what they are. Or maybe it doesn't change as much as Dell thinks. Maybe the sky over the Oklahoma Territory is still the sky over the Oklahoma Territory, the second time and the third time and the 40th time, and maybe you still, every morning when the cold is there and the coffee is there and the herd is moving into the day, feel some version of the thing you felt on the first morning. You don't know yet. You'll know on the second drive. The room Drum has arranged at the boarding house on Cedar Street is small. 2 beds to a room, you and Wash sharing by default. The bed is the most significant object in the room. The bed is not soft by most standards, a straw mattress on a wooden frame, sheets that are clean if worn, a pillow of debatable substance. But after 90 nights on a bedroll on the ground, after the accumulated weight of 90 mornings lifting yourself off caliche and grass and riverbank and Oklahoma prairie, it is inexpressibly wonderful. You sit on the edge of it and press your hands into the mattress and feel it give under your palms. Wash is already in his bed, boots off, hat over his face. Don't, he says. Don't what? Whatever you're about to say about the bed, just get in it. You get in it. The ceiling of the boarding house room is wood, slightly water-stained in one corner. There's a window, and through it the sounds of Abilene. Less now than earlier, the saloons quieting toward midnight, the piano gone, just the ambient sounds of a small town in the late evening. Somewhere outside, a horse. Somewhere else, a door. Your body is doing something it hasn't done in 3 months, which is the process of decompressing from sustained motion. Your hips ache. Your lower back aches. Your thighs and calves have the deep, persistent ache of muscles used daily for months and now abruptly asked to stop. These are not bad pains exactly. They're the specific aches of use, the way a tree bent by constant wind aches when the wind stops, the particular saw of something returning to upright. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyes has the slight rolling quality it often has after days on horseback, the ghost of motion, the residual sense of movement that your body can't quite release yet. You're moving, even lying still. You lie still and you are moving. You're on the trail. You're in the drag position, in the dust, on Red, who is steady beneath you. The herd is moving north. 2,000 animals and the sound of them, and the sky is the enormous Texas sky, and the smell is the smell of everything. Dust and cattle and grass and something electric far off on the horizon. You're on the bank of the Red River. The water is high and brown and fast, and the led steer is making its decision at the water's edge, and you're behind it all on Red, watching, waiting for the herd to commit. You're riding circles around a bedded herd at 2 a.m, the moon high and cold, speaking soft words to animals that can hear you and take comfort from the sound of a known thing. You're on a galloping horse in the dark. This stampede a wall of sound around you, the rain coming sideways, the lightning strobing, the ground invisible beneath Red's feet, and Red making all the decisions about the ground, trusting you to make the decisions about direction. You're at the top of the arc of the mill, the herd slowing beneath you, the roar changing from directional to circular, the crisis ending, the rain still coming but the worst of the lightning gone east. You're sitting by the fire the morning after, the sky blue and scrubbed, the air clean, Tully's coffee in a tin cup, your hand still shaking slightly from the adrenaline working its way out. You're on the Kansas plains, day 70, early morning, the grass going silver in the first light, and the herd is moving and the dust is the baseline and Red stride is the rhythm of the day. There's a thing the trail does to your relationship with big spaces. You grew up in Kentucky, in the hollows and ridges and the specific intimacy of a landscape that keeps closing in on itself, trees and hills always providing the next wall, the next frame, the next reduction of the available sky. It felt natural. It felt normal. It was the scale at which you understood the world. The Great Plains gave you a different scale, and that scale doesn't go away when you leave. You'll carry it with you. From Abilene, wherever you go next, south to Texas again for the next drive, or somewhere else from somewhere else, you'll carry the knowledge of that scale, the knowledge that the sky is that big, that the land is that flat, that you're capable of moving through it for 90 days and being changed by it and surviving it. There's a particular quality of attention that the trail develops, not hypervigilance, not the anxious scanning of someone expecting threats. Something quieter and more sustained than that. The low, steady awareness of someone who has learned that the environment communicates, that the sky has information in it if you look, that the cattle have information in them if you listen, that Red has information in his muscles and his ears if you pay attention. That doesn't go away either. You'll go somewhere after this, and someone will be in the middle of a sentence, and you'll notice the clouds on the horizon that they haven't noticed, and you'll mention it, and they'll look at you with the mild curiosity of someone wondering how you knew to look. You'll look the way Drum taught you to look, without knowing Drum taught you anything, because Drum didn't teach you anything formally. You just watched him look and look the same way until looking that way became yours. Abilene is quieter now. The sounds from Texas Street have settled into the particular late-night quiet of a town that knows the party is over, the low ambient sounds of people and animals at rest. Your body is heavy against the mattress, the specific heaviness of 90 days, the accumulated weight of all of it, bearing down in the best possible way. You think about the trail, and then you stop thinking about it, and then it's there anyway, without thought, the way important things are just there. The herd moving north, the sound of it, the smell of it, the enormous sky above it, red beneath you, steady and true, the storms coming from the west, the rivers running fast, the nights with their stars. You survived it. You crossed the rivers and held the flank in the dark and rode through the stampede and came out the other side on a horse that trusted you and a skill set that didn't exist 3 months ago, and $27 in your inside pocket and the specific knowledge of exactly what your body is capable of when it has no choice but capability. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all. Somewhere in Kentucky the hills are green right now, in the specific way of late spring, the way the leaves are new and the light comes through them differently than it will in 2 months when the canopy is full and the shade is heavy. The hollows you grew up in, the ridge lines, the creeks with their cold, clear water that tastes nothing like the Red River. You're not that person anymore who grew up there, not exactly. The drive has done what the drive does. You came in as someone who could ride and had some basic skills and was willing to work, and 3 months of specific, relentless, cumulative experience have turned those materials into something else. Something that knows rivers and cattle and horses and storms and what the smell of ozone in the air before lightning means, and how to negotiate the silence between a man and a task that requires something from him. Kentucky is still there. The hills are still green. The people you knew are still doing what people do. But when you go back, if you go back, and you might not, the trail is a long way from Kentucky and the world is wide. You'll be a different person walking back in, quieter probably, more comfortable in silence, more attentive to the sky, with a specific personal knowledge of what it looks like when 2,000 animals decide to run. Wash is breathing slowly across the room, not quite snoring, the sound of someone deeply asleep. You close your eyes again and let the sounds of Abilene quiet down to almost nothing. The piano long since done, the horses settled, the street empty. You could sleep for a week. Your body knows this and is demanding it, and the mattress is cooperating. There's a particular peace in this. The peace that comes after a hard thing. Not just the physical relief of rest, but the deeper quiet that comes when something difficult is done. When you've carried something heavy for a long time and you've set it down and your arms are empty, but the muscles still remember the weight, and in the remembering there's a kind of gratitude for having been able to carry it at all. You carried it. 3 months, 1,700 miles, 2,000 cattle, minus the ones the trail took, the rivers and the storms and the dark and the dust and the nights. You carried it and you're here and the bed is soft. The Chisholm Trail is already beginning to be what will eventually fully become a path, a route, a memory in the land itself. The years of drives have worn it into the grass, a wide swathe of beaten ground running north from Texas that can be seen from distance, a scar that the prairie is slowly growing back over but slowly. In 20 years the trail will be essentially finished. The railheads will move, the buffalo will be gone, the open range will be divided by barbed wire into fenced sections that longhorns can't move through. The longhorns themselves will be bred out, replaced by Herefords and Angus, and other eastern breeds that put on weight faster and don't require 3 months of walking to get to market. The men who drove them will get old and tell stories, and most of those stories will get a little better with each telling, the way stories do, the stampede a little bigger, the rivers a little wider, the lightning a little closer. But the grass remembers. The grass remembers the sound of 4,000 hooves a day for a decade. The specific weight of that many animals pressed into it. The particular way a herd of longhorns grazes as it moves. The way the trail broadened over the years as each new drive moved slightly to fresh grass, and the beaten path widened. The grass is patient. It grows back, slowly, in its own time, but it remembers. And somewhere in the Oklahoma prairie, in the flat country north of the Cimarron, a particular stretch of grass carries, in its root structure, in the soil chemistry of it, the memory of a Tuesday afternoon in 1873 when 2,240 Texas longhorns walked through it on their way north, and among them a dark red steer with outward curving horns who had done this before and knew the way, and behind them a 19-year-old from Kentucky on a sorrel horse named Red, who was learning the way and would know it after this for the rest of his life. Abilene, late. The stars are out. The same stars that were out over the trail all those nights. The same Milky Way that was there when you rode night watch and talked to sleeping cattle in a voice you'd never used before and haven't used since. They're here too. Even through the boarding house window, even through the ambient light of a cattle town at the end of a season, they're always there. That doesn't change. You're warm. You're fed. You're lying on a mattress in Abilene, Kansas, and your bones are settling into it, and your body is releasing 90 days of motion, and the walls of the room are doing their particular domestic work of containing space, making a world that is yours for the night. Tomorrow there's a decision to be made, south or north or east or somewhere else. Another drive or something different. The world is wide, and you're 19, and you know a few things now that you didn't know before. But that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this. The mattress, the quiet, the breathing of a man across the room who knows the rivers and the trail and the night watch, who once lay flat in a field while a stampede ran over him and survived it by the width of 2 feet, and mentions it the way he mentions everything without emphasis as one more fact about the world. The sounds of Abilene settling into night, the distant, very distant suggestion of wind across the flat land outside the town, the prairie at night, breathing, the grass moving in whatever small movements grass makes when people are sleeping, when cattle are penned, when horses are resting. The world is still there. It was there before you, and it will be there after. And for 90 days you move through a piece of it in a way that left something in you and left something in the land, and the land is patient and you are young, and neither of you is finished yet. Let it quiet. Let the last sounds of the town fade down to the level of almost nothing. A horse somewhere, a door, the faint tick of the building settling. Let your body be heavy. Let the trail be what it was. Real and hard, and yours now in the way that experience becomes yours, permanently, carried in the muscles and the knowledge and the specific embodied memory of what it cost and what it gave. You crossed the rivers. You held the flank in the dark. You came through. That doesn't go away. You're warm enough, tired enough, safe enough. The stars are above the roof of the boarding house, doing what stars do, indifferent and constant and beautiful. The grass is out on the plains, growing back slowly over the trail. The herd is in the pens, and you're here. 19 years old, 1,700 miles from where you started, in a bed in Abilene, Kansas. The night is quiet. The trail is behind you. Let it rest. Let it all rest. You've earned it. Good night.